When I first started at Suffolk County Health Department, the county health department at that time was on the heels of some of the most progressive changes that have been made in the county sanitary code. What we call Article 6, Article 7, and Article 12 all dealt with how we protect groundwater from toxic and hazardous materials. We don't even think about that now, but underneath every gas station is a double-walled fiberglass tank with leak detection, and all those systems never used to be there. The amount of building that you can put on a piece of property with a private well and with an individual sanitary system was for the first time set by the Suffolk County Health Department, and that made some local municipalities a little cranky. But the reality was it was being done for the protection of water quality. And there was a very good energy then. I was at the county in '87 as the market kind of fell apart. It got harder and harder, and these budget issues that have dogged government now for 20 years, has made it harder to do those jobs. And I think the good news is that you can sort of see this life being breathed back into those agencies, the Department of Environmental Conservation, which has also suffered from lots of cuts, the County Health Department, various even local and municipal departments, planning and zoning, who are trying to do something new and different, and it's exciting. And all policy goes the same way, which is there's a period of time when you're at the top and everybody's moving in that direction, and then it slips, and you keep to try to pull it back up again. But we are now going back up the ramp for the second round. Having been through part of the first round, I can tell you it is very exciting to know that we're going. It's also instructive to know that it only stays alive as long as you continue to kick and push and pull and do whatever you can.
You mentioned in your presentation the number of different agencies. How do we untangle all that? We're also seeing now the coordination among all these different parts.
Right. And you need a 21st century management strategy. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. And you and I were talking earlier as a guy who worked in the health department, and we thought the things that we were doing were absolutely the most important things, and they were very important. But they really didn't integrate well because we had a series of assignments that were coming at us through one channel. The DEC had a series of assignments coming at it from its channels. And what the IBM folks who deal in business matters all the time said is, if you really want to make this thing work, you've got to figure out how to get all of these ducks in a row and get everybody talking to each other.
There's an issue that's come up of late that you are heavily involved in, and I think all Long Islanders need to know what's at stake, what we could potentially lose if Plum Island is turned over to development. If you could explain what Plum Island is, its history, what's there, and why we need to keep it.
So at the very end of eastern Long Island, 7 miles east of my house, is Plum Island, an 840-acre federally owned coastal island, which is about 20% developed for a research facility. Now, I know the research facility has all sorts of exciting tales to be told about it. What goes on at that site from a research standpoint is primarily done to try to protect our food supply. So they're researching various types of diseases and vaccines that affect cows and swine and other things. But that facility is about to move to Kansas, and there was a long process through which that determination was made. And somewhere along the line, unbeknownst to most people, including the congressional representatives of our region, somebody said, you know what, we should sell it. Just sell the whole island to somebody, whoever wants to buy it. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we have been working to try to protect a resource that's already in the public domain, and to provide an opportunity to see some of the wondrous natural resources on that island protected for the future. And it's important to know that that island, because of the reason the lab was built there is because not a lot of things can get out there. So it has a unique geography. It is a great and valuable coastal ecosystem for rare birds like piping plovers, or we have bank swallows, or we have roseate terns that are using that area for foraging. We have one of the largest seal hole-outs along the Atlantic seaboard that you can go out there in the wintertime, and several hundred seals out there, osprey, so lots and lots and lots of creatures that can't make it in our developed landscape are making it on Plum Island. Good.
The Hills Project, 400 acres abutting the Shinnecock Bay.
Right. So here we have the last undeveloped privately held parcel of the Central Suffolk Pine Barrens, which many of us have spent many years trying to protect. It is not zoned for the purpose that it's being applied for. It is currently zoned for 1 unit of residential development for every 5 acres, and 65 to 70% of that would have to be set aside as protected land. There's a unique, well, not totally unique, but there is a zoning provision in the town of South Hampton that allows you to come in sort of with whatever you think is a good idea and provide a series of what are called community benefits to get that approved. So this project now has come in with 100 units of residential development plus a championship golf course plus a giant clubhouse, and it's an exclusive resort community being put forward by a very large and successful development company. And the irony of this piece of property is that while it is the largest piece of contiguous undeveloped pine barrens left in this area, it also drains into one of the worst areas of western Shinnecock Bay, meaning that the water that flows underneath that piece of property is critical to the survival of that western bay. The water under that property is clean, and it makes up for water on the other sides of that property, which are not so clean. And so this project is come in under this Planned Development District statute. Many of us have gone to the town and said, look, this whole statute doesn't make sense anymore. Whatever you thought you were going to get out of this, it's not working. We need to have a do-over, repeal that. I think there is a new administration and new board members in Southampton town, and I think they've heard that message. But the threat's very real that large piece could go as something other than a very low-density residential development. And that, in fairness, the developers have said, we will do things to make sure that there's not a water quality problem. All I can tell you is that anytime you do something, the unintended consequences usually far outweigh the consequences that you knew about.
Even if they did everything that they said they were going to, you still have that open space as really a source for our drinking water. And if you build on top of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely a filter for our drinking water. It has been the subject of preservation efforts for more than a decade. Suffolk County and the town have both sought to buy the property. We want to continue to urge that outcome and work with the developer if there's any way to make that happen, because it's a filter. It's a sand filter helping those western bays. The other thing is that the habitat on this property, some of the planned development districts that went on in Southampton were on pieces of property that were already obliterated with some other kind of development. And these things came in, and you could argue that it was a decent trade-off because you got something other than what you had.
Right.
This piece of property doesn't have that condition. This is an undeveloped piece of pine barrens, so that pine barrens habitat is largely intact throughout the site. And this would radically alter that. And the habitat is also of value, not just the water that goes through that habitat into the ground, because there are unique species and it's a unique ecosystem here on Long Island that many people have fought for many years to protect. So it is, and it's interesting because this is at the western exterior of the east end, this project, and Plum Island is at the northeastern tip. So we have two of the largest projects that we've ever confronted happening simultaneously. One on each end of the east end, and so it's a challenge. But again, I'm very pleased to say that people have risen up and stood up for the cause of conservation. Local civic organizations, community groups, not just environmental guys, and I think so long as that happens, we have our best chance at seeing a preservation outcome in both of those pieces.
I've been very encouraged by the grassroots response to these water issues. I think the more people understand what's at stake, that's why we're doing this show, actually, the better chance we have of building a sustainable Long Island, one where our children and grandchildren can fish, swim, and boat like they have. And it was really the Clean Water Act that put everything in motion when we first started to realize what the degradation was.
Just the fact that local towns have done their own work, in the town of Southampton and other places, we have something called an Aquifer Protection Overlay District. In East Hampton, we have a Water Recharge Overlay District. These are specific zoning overlays that basically require you to protect open land in large quantities for any development project, and all of that is really an effort to preserve the clean drinking water beneath. So when it moves from the federal level all the way down to a local planning board, that's the right way for it to go. So in other words, we're not looking at something here which is being directed from Washington. There are local initiatives, and people should remember that in their own communities, talking to your village board or your town board, there are lots of things that can be done that you can then watch every single day because you live there, and that only supports the larger state, county initiative. In fact,